Good evening, and thank you for slipping into Sleepy Kitchen with me. Tonight, we're leaning into the story of ancient honey, the kind people once scraped from comb and sealed in clay, a rare sweetness valued because it could be stored, traded, and offered long before sugar was ordinary. In many early societies, honey touched everyday meals and sacred rites alike, stirred into healing mixtures, baked into cakes, and used in preserving, where its dense sugars helped slow spoilage. Beekeeping itself was careful work, guided by seasons, smoke, and simple hives built to shelter a living colony. One curious detail is that some ancient Egyptian records describe beekeepers floating hives down the Nile, so their bees could follow fresh blooms. Tonight, we'll take that old sweetness slowly, letting each detail settle in a quiet, steady way. For now, let your shoulders soften. Take one slow breath in and out, and just enjoy this episode with me. If you'd like more calm, factual bedtime food stories, you can subscribe or simply come back whenever you want. Let's begin. Sealed honey, found in ancient Egyptian tombs, has often been reported to remain edible after around 3,000 years. That span is roughly the distance from the age of the pyramids to the modern world, which helps the mind feel how unusual it is for a food to last. The reason is that properly ripened honey holds very little available water, so many spoilage microbes cannot easily multiply inside it. Honey is also dense with dissolved sugars, and that concentrated environment makes it hard for many organisms to function normally. When honey is kept sealed from humidity and kept free of crumbs or dirt, it tends to stay stable rather than turn sour or moldy. When honey does go bad, it is often because extra water and microbes were introduced, which is a reminder that the container matters. That reputation is one of the quiet reasons honey shows up so often in early records and traditions as something dependable to store. So, a closed jar of honey is closer to a long-term keepsake than a quick expiring ingredient. Honey is one of the oldest sweeteners people have relied on, mainly because it delivers sweetness without needing refining or cooking first. Unlike granulated sugar, which depends on specific crops and careful processing, honey can be gathered wherever flowers grow and bees can thrive. In everyday terms, it was sweetness that did not require a mill, a press, or a boiling pan, so it could be used even where tools were limited. A spoonful goes a long way because honey is already concentrated. A small jar can sweeten many servings. It is also portable, which means sweetness could travel on foot, by boat, or in trade bundles without spoiling immediately. Once you understand that convenience, it becomes easier to see why honey stayed important even as other sugars appeared. Some of the earliest visual clues about honey hunting appear in prehistoric rock art that seems to show a person collecting honey from a nest. Even if the drawing is simple, the message is clear. People were willing to climb, reach, and accept stings for this particular reward. Honey is mostly sugars, which means a small amount carries a lot of energy compared with many wild plants, more like a compact ration than a leafy snack. A small smear can deliver intense sweetness because the sugars are packed into a thick form instead of diluted with lots of water. Unlike many gathered foods, it does not need cooking to be sweet, which makes it valuable when fuel and time are limited. Those basics help explain why honey hunting was worth the effort, and why it may have been remembered and repeated. In many ancient civilizations, honey was treated as more than flavor. It behaved like a valuable commodity. A food that keeps well can be stored, portioned, traded, and offered. And honey fits those roles because it is both sweet and relatively stable. Written records from different cultures describe honey in foods, in early medical mixtures, and in offerings. Those uses share one practical advantage. Honey can travel through time and distance without falling apart quickly. Something that can be weighed or poured makes it easier to track and share, which is part of what turns a food into a trade item. Because honey can be kept in small containers, value can be divided into smaller amounts, a little for home use and a little for exchange. In a world without refrigeration, a sweet food that could survive a journey was unusual, and that made it useful for both households and institutions. That usefulness is a calm thread running through honey's long history. Bees are far older than humans, which means honey existed long before people ever tasted it. Evidence from fossils and evolutionary research suggests that bees evolved tens of millions of years ago, while our species is only a thin slice of that timeline. Humans did not invent honey. They learned how to locate it, and later, how to encourage bees to make it in places people could reach safely. Thinking of honey as made for us can hide the real logic. Honey is primarily an insect's survival food, built to keep a colony alive when flowers disappear. Even the taste that humans prize is, for bees, a practical way to store energy in a form that lasts. That viewpoint leads naturally to the question of what the bees are doing to turn fragile nectar into a durable store. Honey lasts because its chemistry makes life difficult for many microbes, especially when it stays clean and dry. High sugar levels draw water away from many bacterial cells, and low moisture means there is simply not much free water available to support growth in the first place. Honey is also mildly acidic, which adds another barrier, in the same basic way that sour foods tend to spoil more slowly than neutral ones. In sealed honey, even yeasts have a hard time getting started because the concentrated sugar ties up the moisture they would normally use. These features do not make honey sterile in every situation, but they do make it unusually resistant to the ordinary decay that ruins most sweet foods. If honey is diluted with a lot of water, it can ferment more easily, which is why wet utensils and unsealed lids change the risk. That is why storage is less about refrigeration and more about keeping honey sealed from extra moisture. Early beekeeping likely expanded as humans settled into agriculture because steady homes and reliable flowering landscapes made keeping hives practical. Managing bees turns a risky seasonal hunt into a predictable harvest, closer to tending a crop than chasing a wild prize. Once hives could be protected, checked, and returned to, honey became something a household could plan around instead of a rare lucky find. It also separated honey from a single dangerous climb, turning it into a repeatable part of the food supply that could support larger communities. Settled beekeeping encouraged people to learn the timing of blooms and the rhythms of seasons, because the bees follow flowers closely. That shift also made honey easier to share and trade, because it could be produced with some regularity rather than only discovered. From there, honey stops being only a wild treasure and becomes part of everyday food planning. Not just a sweetener, honey is the colony's pantry, designed to last through weeks or months when nectar is scarce. Nectar is watery and temporary, while honey is concentrated and shelf-stable, which is exactly what a hive needs for survival. The practical result is that bees must transform nectar until it becomes a long-lasting reserve, and that transformation is a careful sequence of steps rather than a single moment. The goal is simple: remove enough water, and reshape the sugars enough that the stored food does not spoil quickly. If you want the simplest mental model, nectar is like thin juice, and honey is what you get. After water is removed and sugars are reorganized into a stable form. That slow, practical transformation begins with one bee carrying one small load of nectar back to the hive. When I picture that first load of nectar coming home, I keep one scale in mind. A worker honeybee makes only about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey across her whole lifetime. That is just a few drops. The consequence is simple. Honey is not made by a single star performer. It is made by a crowd doing tiny work again and again until the tiny becomes a pantry. Each bee adds a little, and the hive adds those little amounts into a real reserve. Thinking this way, Hias explains why a heavy honey store requires a long stretch of flowers, not just one busy day. A strong honey season is built from many flights, many handoffs, and many hours of drying. With that scale in mind, it makes sense to start with the first step, gathering nectar. Nectar collection is mostly transport work, not eating. Honeybees collect nectar by sipping from flowers with a long tongue called a proboscis. The nectar is carried in a separate pouch inside the bee, often called the crop or honey stomach. That pouch is designed for carrying liquid, not for digesting it like normal food. Because of that, the bee can bring nectar home and pass it to another worker quickly. The handoff keeps nectar available for the hive's shared processing rather than being used up as one bee's fuel. Repeated handoffs are also easy with this design, so one load can be worked on by several bees in sequence. On the flight back, a little water can evaporate and a little enzyme activity can begin, so the transformation starts before the hive fully receives the nectar. Water is the real headline. Fresh nectar is usually mostly water, often around 70%, while finished honey is commonly under about 20% water. In everyday terms, nectar is closer to a sweet drink, and honey is closer to a thick syrup. That thickness comes mainly from removing water, not from adding extra sugar. Water matters because microbes need it, and a wetter food is a friendlier place for fermentation and spoilage. Nectar left very wet would behave like juice left out, changing quickly as yeasts and bacteria find an easy home. So, the central job of honey making is to drive off water until the liquid is dense enough to keep. The hive begins that job not with heat, but with sharing, spreading, and airflow. The first big step looks like passing a cup down a line. Bees start concentrating nectar by passing it from one worker to another, mouth to mouth, in a transfer often called 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿. This is not a one-time exchange. It is a practical workflow that happens in quick, small portions. Sharing spreads the load across the colony. So many bees can work on the same batch instead of one bee waiting. Each pass mixes the nectar with saliva, and saliva carries enzymes that begin changing the sugar mixture. The repeated passing also helps spread nectar into thinner films, and thin films lose water faster than a single deep droplet. A useful comparison is a cup of water spilled wide on a counter versus the same cup held in a bowl. The wide spill dries sooner, simply because more surface is exposed. Enzymes do quiet work in the background while water is leaving. Nectar often contains a lot of sucrose, which is a paired sugar. A commonly described enzyme in bee saliva is invertase. which breaks sucrose into two simpler sugars, glucose and fructose. Those two sugars become the main sweetness of most honey, and their balance shapes how the honey behaves later. The shift happens without heat, more like a slow chemical snip than a cooking reaction. The balance can change sweetness because fructose tastes sweeter than sucrose by weight. It can also change texture because glucose is more likely to crystallize than fructose, which is one reason some honeys granulate faster than others. While sugars are being adjusted, the colony keeps focusing on moisture because concentration is what turns sweetness into storage. Moving air is the other half of the method. Unlike boiling on a stove, bees remove water from nectar with airflow, warmth, and time. Worker bees fan their wings to move humid air away from open cells, and steady circulation lets moisture evaporate from the nectar's surface. A plain comparison is laundry. Fabric dries faster with moving air than with still air. Bees also keep nectar spread out because a thin layer exposes more surface area, and surface area is where evaporation happens. This drying can continue for days as nectar thickens, especially when nectar flows are strong and the hive is trying to store quickly. As water leaves, the liquid thickens, and the same sugars take up less space because they are no longer diluted. Humidity inside the hive matters too, because evaporation slows when the surrounding air is already damp. Fanning helps carry moist air away, so evaporation keeps moving in the right direction. The moisture level decides whether honey keeps. Bees treat honey as finished when the water content is low enough that it will store safely. Many beekeepers describe ripe honey as typically below about 20% water, though exact numbers can vary with conditions and nectar source. The point of the threshold is straightforward. Too much water invites fermentation, especially from yeast that can ride in on nectar. If a wet batch is sealed too early, it can sour and bubble, wasting the colony's hard collected fuel. This is also why timing matters when humans harvest. Honey that is capped before it is dry enough can ferment, and beekeepers watch for capping as a sign that the bees consider the work finished. Drying is the safety step, and it is why thick honey can sit without fermenting under normal conditions. Once the moisture is low enough, the solution is wonderfully plain: a wax lid. To protect finished honey, bees cap each full cell with a thin lid of beeswax. The cap acts like a fitted cover that limits contact with humid air, helping keep the honey from taking on moisture again. Beeswax is produced by worker bees from glands on their bodies, and making wax costs energy. Because wax is costly, capping is saved for honey that is truly ready, not for nectar that still needs drying. The cap also blocks debris and small intruders, keeping the stored honey cleaner than an open cell would stay. After capping, the honey can sit in place for long stretches with minimal change, ready when the colony needs it. One yearly number helps show the scale of that pantry. In a good season, a healthy hive can produce roughly 30 to 60 pounds of honey. That amount can fill many 1-pound jars, but most of it is meant to stay with the bees as their fuel when flowers are not available. A big yield is not just a matter of flowers. It also depends on weather, bloom timing, and how long nectar is flowing in that place. Even when people harvest, careful keepers typically leave plenty behind so the colony can survive, which shows who the honey is really for. To produce and protect a reserve like that, The colony depends on coordinated roles and steady communication. That organized teamwork is the next piece that makes honey possible. A beehive is less like a small family and more like a busy town, simply because of how many bodies it can hold at once. In peak season, a hive can carry somewhere between about 20,000 and 80,000 bees. That is the difference between a small neighborhood and a stadium crowd, and it changes how fast work can happen. A big population can staff more foragers, more nurses, and more fanners at the same time, which helps turn a brief bloom into stored honey before weather shifts. During strong bloom periods, that extra headcount also helps with ventilation and drying, because many small wing beats add up to real airflow. When winter arrives, the numbers usually drop, so the peak tells you how hard the colony can push when conditions are best. Thinking of the hive as a population first makes the next facts feel practical, because every job is scaled to that headcount. That headcount is the engine behind everything else. The day-to-day work that turns nectar into stored honey is done by worker bees, and workers are female. These are the bees that forage, feed larvae, build wax, fan air, and cap honey cells. Male bees, called drones, exist mainly for mating, and they do not gather nectar or handle the daily maintenance that keeps the colony running. Drones are fed by workers, so each extra drone is another mouth that relies on the workforce rather than adding to it. In many colonies, drone numbers rise in spring and summer and drop later, because the hive invests in reproduction when it is possible and trims extra mouths when resources tighten. So when people say the hive, they are mostly describing a workforce, not a family structure like ours. A worker bee's life is short during the active months, which keeps the workforce young and constantly renewing. Many descriptions put a typical summer worker lifespan at about 6 weeks, give or take, because flying, carrying loads, and constant work wear the body down. That short span means the colony must raise new workers continuously just to maintain strength. The hive is built around routines that new bees can step into without long training, because the roster is always changing. Riskier jobs like long-distance foraging tend to fall on older workers, which helps the colony get value from each bee before she wears out. This also means the hive's memory is mostly in shared patterns and signals, not in a few long-lived specialists, so coordination tools matter. Foraging is a lesson in repetition, because one bee must visit many flowers to bring home a meaningful load of nectar. In good conditions, a bee may visit around 50 to 100 flowers on a single trip, depending on the bloom and how much nectar each flower offers. If a flower offers only a small drop, the bee may move on in seconds, repeating the pattern again and again until the crop is filled. Each visit is brief, but the total adds up, and a bee may make multiple trips in a day when conditions are good. The work also includes navigation and return, so a trip is not only sipping, it is a loop of searching, collecting, and delivering. Once a bee finds a rich patch, the hive benefits if others can head there efficiently, rather than starting from zero. Bees share location information with a movement language, often called the waggle dance. When a forager returns from a strong nectar source, she may perform a figure-8 pattern with a straight waggle run in the middle. In many explanations, the angle of that waggle run relates to direction relative to the sun, and the length or duration relates to distance, giving other workers a usable clue about where to search. Other bees may also pick up scent cues from the dancer, which helps connect the directions to a real floral smell. It is not a perfect map, but it is better than random wandering, especially when flowers are patchy and time matters. The result is that a good discovery can be scaled up quickly as more foragers focus on the same opportunity. Population is not only about bringing food in. The queen's core job is not to lead foraging, but to keep the population supplied, and her laying rate can be surprising when conditions are favorable. In spring and early summer, strong colonies can see a queen lay up to around 2,000 eggs in a day. She lays 1 egg per cell, so the colony must keep thousands of clean, ready cells available to match her pace. The queen is fed and cared for by workers so she can keep laying steadily, and the colony's growth follows her output closely. When food is limited or the colony is stressed, egg laying often slows, which keeps the hive from overcommitting to mouths it cannot feed. All those developing bees also need a stable environment, which brings temperature control into focus. Temperature control in a hive is not a comfort detail. It is essential for raising young bees and for keeping wax workable. Many beekeepers describe the brood area being held near about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, with the colony warming or cooling as needed. That target is achieved by group behavior rather than a single mechanism. Bees can cluster to generate heat, fan air to move excess warmth away, and redistribute themselves so the brood stays in a stable zone. If temperatures climb too high, wax can soften, so airflow is also a way of protecting the structure of stored food. When the brood is kept near its preferred temperature, development stays on schedule, which helps the colony replace workers at the pace it needs. With the nursery stable, the hive can invest its energy in collecting and concentrating nectar whenever flowers are offering it. If you want one idea that captures how much travel hides behind a jar, there are widely repeated estimates about the miles behind a pound of honey. You will often see claims that it takes hundreds of worker bees and tens of thousands of miles of collective flight to make about 1 pound, with figures like 55,000 miles for the hive as a whole appearing in many explanations. Even if you treat that as an approximation rather than a precise measurement, the point is steady. Honey is the product of enormous accumulated miles, with thousands of small trips stitched together across days and weeks. Those miles are part of why the hive relies on honey as an emergency fund for lean weeks, not as a day-to-day surplus. That is why it is precious to the colony, not just to people. When so much work is embodied in one reserve, defending it becomes part of the job. A hive protects its stores, and guard bees at the entrance are a plain example of how a colony defends its pantry. Certain workers take up positions near the opening and check incoming bees by smell, because a hive carries a shared scent that works like an identity badge. Guards also help keep traffic orderly, recognizing nest mates returning with nectar or pollen, so the flow in and out stays smooth. This matters because honey attracts robbers, including bees from other colonies, and a raid can drain stored food quickly. Guards can challenge unfamiliar bees and help trigger a stronger response when pressure rises, especially during nectar shortages when robbery is more tempting. The practical consequence is that a hive is not only producing honey, it is also policing access to it, which helps the colony keep what it has earned. Seeing that careful guarding around sweetness, people learn to keep bees where those stores could be watched and gathered safely. When I look for some of the oldest signs of planned beekeeping, Egypt is one of the first places that steps forward. Ancient art and writing are often interpreted as evidence that people were managing hives by around 2400 BCE, roughly 48 centuries ago. The sources do not agree on every detail, but the broad picture is steady. These were not only raids on wild nests, they were repeatable systems meant to be used again and again. One practical design appears in many descriptions. Beekeepers used clay or mud tube hives, stacked in long rows so dozens of colonies could be kept in a compact yard. Each tube could be capped at the ends, then opened from one side when it was time to work. That mattered because it let people take comb while the colony stayed housed, instead of being burned out or abandoned after harvest. A hive that stays inhabited can produce again. So, honey and wax become planned products rather than rare windfalls. These early hives were fixed comb homes. Unlike modern frame hives, there were no removable frames to lift out neatly. Harvesting often meant cutting or scraping comb from inside, then closing the tube again so the colony could continue. The design feels simple and laborious at the same time. It is simple because it relies on basic materials and routine. It is laborious because each harvest is hands-on, and the comb has to be managed carefully so the bees can rebuild what was taken. The Nile Valley helps explain why continuity mattered. Flowers do not bloom everywhere at once. In many accounts, the river corridor blooms in waves, with one stretch offering nectar while another is between seasons. That is why descriptions of Egyptian beekeeping often include movement. Hives could be loaded onto boats and floated along the Nile so the same colonies could work new blooms instead of waiting for local plants to recover. The boat could drift with the current in one direction, then return by sail, rowing, or towing so colonies could be repositioned as the flowering map shifted. Mobility like that can make supply more predictable. If a colony can work several bloom periods in different locations, honey becomes less dependent on one short local season. That helps explain how honey could be supplied with more consistency to demanding places. Temples needed regular offerings. Households wanted a dependable sweetener. Healers wanted a sticky base for mixtures. Moving hives is a practical bridge between a landscape that blooms in pulses and an institution that wants regular stores. In Egypt, honey is often described as a high-value sweetener that moved easily between sacred use and daily eating. Temple economies favored goods that could be measured, stored, and presented repeatedly in small portions, and honey fits that pattern. Many summaries place honey among offerings to gods, while the same sweetness appears in foods and drinks. A small amount can be stirred into something grain-heavy, spread onto a simple staple, or dissolved into a beverage to soften sharp edges and add aroma. Because honey is concentrated, a little can flavor many servings, and a jar can be carried without needing constant attention. Honey also travels well through time, which matters in a warm climate. When it is kept sealed and fairly dry, honey can stay stable for long stretches because it is so concentrated. That stability makes it easier to store than many other sweet foods that spoil quickly. When a sweetener becomes both practical and prestigious, people protect it, ration it, and write it down. Anything that can be stored, divided, and issued on schedule starts to look like an administrative good, not just a flavor. It is quiet planning, built into ordinary routines daily. When honey appears in Egyptian burial work, it is often described as part of mixtures connected to ritual preparation and embalming, sometimes alongside resins, oils, and aromatic materials. The details vary across periods and sources, so it helps to think in terms of function rather than one fixed recipe. A thick, sugar-rich substance can limit moisture at the surface. It can also act as a binder, helping other ingredients cling as a coating instead of separating during handling. Honey can carry scent, too, so aromatics spread more evenly and stay where they are placed rather than pooling or slipping away. Whether honey was central or supporting in a given preparation, it fit the broader aim of slowing breakdown long enough for rites to be completed. I keep returning to the jars because archaeologists have found honey listed or present among grave goods, including jars placed in tombs. Some high-status burials appear to have included honey as a special provision for the journey imagined after death. A sealed jar is compact, portable, and durable compared with fresh foods. It also signals abundance because it compresses a season of bloom into one container that can be stored and displayed. Even when the jar is symbolic rather than strictly practical, it shows honey's status clearly, like edible wealth that does not require daily care or quick consumption. That status helps explain why the bee itself becomes a recognizable symbol in Egyptian art and state language, tied to place and authority. Royal titulary is often described as using paired emblems to express rule over the two lands, including a pairing commonly translated as the sedge and the bee. In plain language, one sign stood for Upper Egypt and one for Lower Egypt, and together they expressed a unified kingdom under one ruler. In that setting, a bee could represent more than honey. It could represent a region and a political idea, appearing on seals, labels, and official writing, where the sign carried meaning even when no jar was in sight. When honey matters enough to shape symbols and titles, it is not surprising that it also appears in practical lists that deal with injury and illness. In medical texts that survive, many remedies use honey as a base, especially for topical preparations. Discussions of the medical papyri often mention honey mixed with herbs, oils, or minerals for wound dressings and eye-related mixtures. The benefit is simple. Honey spreads and clings, so it holds other ingredients in place instead of running off. Its concentration and mild acidity can also make some mixtures less friendly to spoilage during storage. Because honey dissolves in water, it can be thinned for washes or left thick for dressings, which gives a single ingredient more than one useful form. Honey can also act as a form of wealth in systems where valuable foods double as payment. In some accounts, workers or soldiers received honey as part of rations or compensation when large institutions organized labor and provisioning. A simple way to picture it is concentrated sweetness and calories in a small container, comparable in function to oil, dried fish, or measured grain. It moves easily through storerooms, can be portioned by standard measures, and arrives as something immediately useful, rather than a token that must be traded again to become food. The other Hive product, beeswax, fits that same world in a different way. Beeswax is moldable, meltable, and reusable. It can be shaped into candles for steadier light and used as a sealant to close small gaps and help protect surfaces from moisture. Because wax softens and melts at relatively low temperatures, it can be worked with simple heat sources rather than specialized furnaces, which makes it accessible as an everyday material. Waxed writing surfaces also matter. A wax tablet can be warmed, smoothed, and marked again, supporting lists, tallies, and daily accounting that keep temples, trade, and work crews moving. With honey feeding bodies and wax supporting work, the hive becomes both pantry and toolkit. That combination helps explain why managed beekeeping shows up so clearly in Egyptian life. And once honey's practical and medical reputation is established in one place, it becomes easier to follow how that reputation traveled, changed, and adapted far beyond the Nile. Across many early cultures, honey shows up as something more useful than a sweet garnish. It appears as food, as a simple medicine, and sometimes as a valuable good that could be traded or saved. In the Mediterranean world, Greek and Roman writers discussed honey in preparations simple enough to repeat at home. Medical traditions in China and India also placed honey into mixtures meant to support recovery, often recorded as short ingredient lines that could be copied and carried from teacher to student. The fact that these records come from very different places points to the same idea. Honey's usefulness was easy to notice wherever people lived close enough to bees and flowering plants to gather it. Part of that usefulness is how portable honey is. A small jar travels well, and it does not demand a daily harvest the way fresh herbs might. If the lid stays tight and the contents stay dry, honey keeps its character for a long time. That reliability made it a dependable household ingredient, ready when someone needed sweetness, binding, or a soothing base that did not require cooking on the spot. The practical story starts with shelf life. Honey keeps well when it is sealed and kept dry, so it can sit through a season of scarcity and still be there when someone needs it. That alone makes it different from many plant juices or fresh leaves, which spoil quickly. It also means one jar can serve several purposes depending on how it is handled. Kept thick, honey clings and covers, which makes it useful for pastes. Thinned with water, it turns into something that can be poured and used as a rinse or wash. Stirred into another liquid, it can carry sharp or bitter flavors more smoothly than plain water. That flexibility matters when a home remedy has to fit into ordinary work and ordinary meals. Because it clings, honey was commonly used on minor cuts and small burns in older practice. It forms a protective layer that stays where it is placed. In a world of sharp blades, hot coals, rope work, and sun-baked labor, small skin injuries were ordinary. A treatment that could be applied quickly without special tools had real value. Compared with water or thin plant juices, honey cushions and reduces rubbing. A sticky layer can also keep dust from settling as readily. If a cloth is laid over it, the honey helps hold that cloth in place, creating a simple covering that does not run off the skin. Part of honey's antimicrobial reputation comes from chemistry that becomes more active when honey is diluted. Many honeys contain an enzyme often described as glucose oxidase. When enough water is present, that enzyme can help generate small amounts of hydrogen peroxide, a compound many people recognize from mild antiseptics. In plain terms, honey can act like a slow-forming, low-level antiseptic once it is thinned by moisture on skin or mixed into water for a wash. This does not mean honey behaves like a bottled disinfectant, but it helps explain why honey gained a practical reputation for keeping trouble down in small everyday situations. Another reason honey earned trust is simply that it is so concentrated. Its sugars bind water tightly, leaving very little free moisture for many microbes to use. Honey is also naturally acidic, and the combination of low moisture and acidity makes it a difficult place for spoilage organisms to grow. That is why a jar of honey can sit quietly for long stretches without turning foul. It also explains a common kitchen rule that older households learned by observation. If honey takes on too much water, whether from a wet spoon or from humid storage, it can start to ferment because yeasts finally have enough water to work. Not every honey behaves in exactly the same way because flower source can add another layer beyond sugar, acidity, and low moisture. Some honeys are known for stronger antibacterial activity because their source plants contribute extra compounds. Manuka honey from New Zealand is a well-known modern example, often linked to plant-derived chemicals such as methylglyoxal, alongside the honey's overall concentration and low moisture. The useful takeaway is not that one honey is a cure-all. It is that nectar source can change what ends up in the jar. That is also why older instructions sometimes hinted at choosing a certain honey, or at least choosing a honey that tasted and smelled strong, when the goal was a more powerful mixture. Honey worked as a base for syrups because it dissolves smoothly and makes sharp ingredients easier to take by the spoon. Across many older medical traditions, honey was mixed with liquids such as wine, vinegar, or strong herbal infusions. The result could be a stable drink or a spoonable tonic that could be measured, stored, and taken again without re-cooking every time. Vinegar brings acidity. Wine can contribute a little alcohol. Honey adds sweetness and body, and it can make a mixture feel rounded instead of harsh. In practical terms, that matters because the remedy has to be taken more than once, and a mixture that tastes less sharp is more likely to be taken as directed. As a dressing, honey was often used in poultices, meaning a soft paste spread onto cloth or skin and kept in place for a time. One practical point is that honey's concentrated sugars pull water toward the surface. This is a simple osmotic effect, and it encourages moisture to move into the sweet layer rather than drying out completely. That can help keep a dressing from turning brittle, and it can also reduce how strongly a cloth sticks as it dries. Because honey is sticky, it holds ground herbs in place, acting as a binder for powders that would otherwise fall away. That keeps particles in contact rather than letting them slide off with movement, sweat, or wind. Honey was also given as food to people who were weak or recovering because it delivers energy quickly and is usually easy to swallow. A single tablespoon contains about 60 calories, and honey is largely sugars by weight, mostly simple sugars such as glucose and fructose. The body can use those with minimal digestion compared with starches that must be broken down first. For someone with low appetite, a small spoonful can act like a compact ration, a bit of fuel that does not require chewing. It can also be stirred into warm water, thin porridge, or milk, so the calories arrive in a form that feels gentle and familiar. In Ayurvedic traditions, honey appears not just as a sweetener, but as a carrier that helps deliver other ingredients in a consistent dose. Many descriptions treat it as a substance that blends powders, slows separation in certain mixtures, and makes strong herbs more palatable. That matters when a medicine tastes bitter, drying, or sharp on the tongue. Because honey is thick, it can suspend fine particles better than water, so a spoonful can be more uniform from the top of a jar to the bottom. That makes the dose less dependent on perfect stirring or precise equipment. It is also a practical solution for homes where the measuring tools are often just spoons, cups, and memory. One of the most persistent home uses is honey stirred into warm milk, tea, or water for throat comfort, especially in the evening. Honey's thickness can coat the throat briefly, and that coating can make a scratchy feeling less noticeable for a little while. Because honey dissolves without grit, it sweetens a warm drink smoothly, and a small amount can round out sharp flavors such as lemon or ginger. Many families keep this habit as comfort rather than cure, a small, repeatable ritual that is easy to remember. In that way, honey's long history in healing is not only about bold claims, it is also about simple kitchen logic, stable ingredients, and the gentle relief that comes from a spoonful you can trust. In Jewish tradition, Rosh Hashanah is often welcomed by dipping apple slices in honey as a wish for a sweet new year. The meaning is carried by a small, clear action, a bit of fruit, a bit of honey, and a shared moment at the table. Because honey is intensely sweet, a small bowl can serve many people, so the ritual does not depend on a large supply. The sweetness is concentrated, so the portion can stay tiny and still feel complete. Honey also stores well in a sealed jar, which makes it dependable from one season to the next, even as fresh fruit and fresh treats come and go. That reliability matters for holiday foods, because tradition often depends on ingredients that can wait patiently until the date returns. In practical terms, honey is a sweetener that can be kept on hand without special equipment, ready for a moment that repeats every year. In ancient Roman cooking, honey often served the role that modern cooks expect from refined sugar and poured syrups. Roman recipes and food writing suggest honey was used with fruit and also with savory dishes. A small amount can soften sharp salt, round out sour notes, and help a surface brown as heat drives off moisture. In a sauce, a spoonful can shift balance without turning the dish into dessert, especially when the rest of the flavor comes from herbs, wine, and strongly salted ingredients. Honey is also thick, so it can cling to foods during roasting or glazing, letting sweetness stay at the surface where browning happens fastest. Before cane sugar became common in Europe, honey was one of the few sweeteners that could be stored and used predictably across many meals. When a sweetener is portable and steady, it becomes a daily tool. It stops being only a celebration ingredient and starts behaving like a pantry staple. That pantry staple becomes something else as soon as it is diluted. Mead exists because once honey is mixed with water, yeast can ferment the sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. The change is simple. Thick and low moisture becomes thinner and higher moisture. That shift turns honey from a food that resists fermentation into a liquid that invites it. Mead can be made with basic tools, because yeast can come from the environment, from fruit skins, or from a saved starter. The main requirements are time, a container, and a process that stays reasonably clean. Fermentation usually slows when easy sugars are mostly used up, or when alcohol rises high enough to stress the yeast. The final drink can end up dry or slightly sweet depending on the batch and the yeast. Noticing this pattern helps tie two facts together. Honey can be a long-lasting store in a jar, and it can also be a starting point for a living drink, depending on how much water is added. Northern European storytelling is often linked with mead, and honey wine appears in sagas and poems as a drink for gatherings, feasts, and gift-giving. This association is part history and part literary memory, because mead shows up in many places and many periods, not only in one region. The word honeymoon is sometimes explained as a custom of celebrating the first month of marriage with a honey-based drink. Historians often note that the term's history has multiple strands, and the sweet first month idea is broader than any single recipe. Still, the image persists for a practical reason. A lunar month is about 29 days, so the phrase, "a month of honey," is easy to hold in the mind. Whether or not the word came directly from mead, honey's symbolism around weddings has stayed durable. Honey is sweet, stable, and shareable, which makes it an easy ingredient for a ritual taste. In some Hindu wedding traditions, honey appears as a ceremonial sweetness meant to signal welcome, harmony, and an auspicious beginning. A practice often described as madhuparka offers a mixture that can include honey as part of honoring a guest or marking an important moment. The point is not complexity. It is meaning carried in a small taste. Honey fits this role because it delivers strong sweetness in a tiny amount, so the act stays simple and focused. Honey also stores well and travels easily, which helps when ingredients must be prepared ahead of time and shared without fuss. A small portion can be offered from person to person without a kitchen full of equipment. The gesture stays careful, and the ingredient stays reliable. That combination of symbolism and practicality is one reason honey appears in ceremonies built from small, repeatable actions. In traditional Chinese medicine, honey is often described as sweet and supportive, used in ways meant to soothe dryness and comfort the throat and lungs. Even when the language of explanation differs from modern science, the practical reasons are easy to see in the kitchen. Honey blends smoothly into powders and pastes, helping fine ingredients hold together. It also makes bitter herbs easier to take, which matters when a remedy must be repeated over many days. Many descriptions treat honey as a harmonizer, meaning it can soften harsh edges so a mixture is more tolerable. In everyday terms, it helps a preparation become a routine instead of a struggle. Honey can also be used thick or thinned, so the same jar can support a paste, a syrup, or a warm drink. When an ingredient is flexible like that, it tends to appear again and again, even as specific recipes change from region to region. In Ethiopia, 𝐓𝐈𝐌𝐿𝐿 is a traditional honey wine that has been brewed for many generations and served at celebrations and everyday gatherings. 𝐓𝐈𝐿𝐿 is typically made by fermenting honey with water. It is often flavored with 𝐓𝐿𝐏 leaves or stems, a local plant that adds bitterness and aroma in a way that is sometimes compared to how hops balance sweetness in beer. That bitterness matters because it keeps the drink from tasting one note. Honey's richness stays present without becoming cloying. 𝐓𝐈𝐿𝐿 is commonly poured from a rounded glass flask called a barrel. The vessel is a small detail, but it shows how a honey-based ferment becomes part of daily culture, not just a formula on paper. 𝐓𝐈𝐿𝐿 houses and home brewers rely on the same basic principle. Honey becomes lively after water gives yeast room to work, and a familiar serving ritual grows around the finished drink. Honey also shows up repeatedly in baked goods, especially cakes meant to be shared over several days. Honey cakes appear in many places because honey sweetens, holds moisture, and brings a deeper flavor than plain white sugar. You can find versions in spiced European cakes, honey-soaked pastries in parts of the Middle East, and layered honey cakes in Eastern Europe. The flowers change, the nuts change, and the spice blends change, but the underlying logic repeats. Honey helps a cake stay tender longer, which matters when a dessert is meant to last through a holiday week, be packed as a gift, or sit out for many servings without turning dry. Honey also browns readily as it bakes, deepening color and aroma even when ingredients are otherwise simple. In practical terms, honey supports both flavor and texture. It marks celebration, and it also helps a cake keep its best qualities for a few days. In folk medicine, honey is often paired with strong foods like garlic or onion in mixtures meant for coughs and colds. The main role honey plays is practical. It makes sharp flavors easier to swallow, and it can coat the throat briefly, which some people find comforting. The plant ingredients contribute their own pungent compounds, even though evidence for specific outcomes varies and is not the same as a proven treatment for serious illness. These mixtures are best treated as comfort and support, not as a substitute for medical care when symptoms are severe, persistent, or worsening. There is also one important safety detail that many families learn early. Honey is not recommended for infants under 1 year old because of the risk of infant botulism. For older children and adults, the appeal of these mixtures is often their simplicity. They rely on ingredients that store well, so they are easy to keep on hand and easy to repeat when someone feels run down. Across all these customs, the same quiet feature is doing work in the background. Honey stays usable for a long time when it is kept clean and sealed. That staying power makes it a dependable ritual ingredient, a steady pantry sweetener, a base for syrups, and a foundation for fermentation. It also explains why honey can move through trade routes and across seasons without falling apart. A jar can travel, wait, and still be ready when opened. And that brings the story to the next practical question. What is it exactly about honey that lets it keep so well, even when so many other sweet foods spoil quickly? Honey keeps so well mostly because there is very little free water inside it, meaning water that microbes can actually use. Scientists often describe this idea as water activity, and honey's is low compared with most foods. A simple comparison is fruit juice versus syrup. Syrup is harder for microbes to grow in because it does not offer easy water. Properly ripened honey can sit for a long time without turning fuzzy or sour in the way fresh sweet liquids do. Once you understand that, the next protective layer becomes easier to see. Honey is also naturally acidic. Most honey is acidic, with a pH often described in a range of roughly 3 to 4.5. That puts it closer to acidic foods than to plain water, and many bacteria prefer a more neutral environment. Acidity does not make honey magically safe in every situation, but it adds a steady barrier that slows or blocks many common spoilage microbes. The practical consequence is that honey does not need refrigeration to stay stable when it is kept clean and sealed. After acidity, the next barrier is the sheer concentration of sugar. Honey's sugar concentration creates strong osmotic pressure. In everyday terms, honey pulls water out of cells that touch it. When many microbes lose water, they cannot function normally or reproduce well, so growth slows dramatically. This is the same general principle behind salting food and sugaring fruit for preserves, but honey is already concentrated without extra cooking. The result is that honey behaves like a built-in preservative environment, even though it is still a natural food. Once you know that, it also makes sense why the main risk is not time. The main risk is added moisture. Honey can ferment when its moisture rises high enough for yeast to work. Yeasts are more tolerant of sugar than many bacteria, so if the water content climbs, honey may start to bubble or smell slightly alcoholic over time. One cause is honey absorbing moisture from humid air. Another is honey being stored before it was fully ripened and capped by the bees. A third is contamination from a wet utensil, because water changes the microenvironment in small pockets. This is why beekeepers pay attention to moisture, and why at home the best protection is usually simple. Keep honey tightly sealed, and keep water out of the jar. Honey is hygroscopic, which means it attracts and absorbs water from the air when it is exposed. If a lid is left loose in a humid kitchen, honey can take on moisture at the surface, even though it still looks thick. That thin, wet layer is where fermentation is most likely to begin, because yeast needs water access first. The practical fix is plain. Use a clean, dry spoon and close the jar firmly after each use. If honey is treated like something that hates humidity, it tends to stay dependable. Crystallized honey is not spoiled honey. It is honey changing texture as glucose forms tiny crystals. Some honeys crystallize quickly and some stay liquid longer, largely because different flower sources create different glucose to fructose balances. Cooler temperatures often encourage crystallization, while warmer storage slows it. That is why a jar can go grainy in a pantry during a cold season. Crystals can even make honey easier to spread, and the flavor is usually unchanged. Knowing crystallization is normal helps you avoid throwing out perfectly good honey. To return crystallized honey to liquid, gentle warming is usually enough. Slow is better than hot. A common method is setting the closed jar in warm water and letting time do the work, rather than blasting it with high heat. High heat can darken honey and soften its delicate aromas, and repeated overheating can make it taste flatter over time. The goal is not boiling. It is loosening the crystals until they dissolve again. When honey is warmed gently, it can flow smoothly without losing the character that makes one honey taste different from another. Once you know crystals are normal, the next question is what raw changes. Raw honey often contains natural particles such as pollen and tiny bits of wax. It may also hold active enzymes. Those components can be filtered out or reduced in processed honey, which is one reason store-bought honey can look very clear and sometimes stay liquid longer. The core point is that raw does not mean sterile. It means less processed. Honey's stability still depends mainly on low moisture and clean storage. If raw honey is kept sealed and dry, it can be as stable as other honey and sometimes more aromatic. This also explains why people argue about what honey should look like. Clarity and crystallization are often signs of processing choices and sugar balance, not signs of safety. Honey's preservation power made it a useful food long before refrigeration because it could sweeten and store at the same time. In a pantry world, that meant one jar could act as both flavor and a way to protect certain mixtures, especially when combined with dry ingredients or acidic ones. Even so, honey is not a substitute for safe canning practices in modern terms. Low moisture is the key, and not every honey mixture stays low moisture once it is combined with fruit, juice, or water. The simplest rule is clear. Keep honey as honey if the goal is indefinite storage, and treat diluted honey like any other sweet liquid that can ferment. Evidence from archaeology and chemistry suggests that sealed honey can remain stable for extremely long periods when it stays dry and uncontaminated. Reports of very old honey being found intact tend to emphasize the same conditions: sealed containers and limited exposure to humidity. It is more responsible to treat those stories as demonstrations of stability rather than an invitation to taste unknown ancient finds, because contamination and storage conditions vary. The reliable takeaway is that honey's durability is real, and it comes from simple barriers you can understand. With that groundwork, it becomes easier to enjoy the huge range of honeys because shelf life stops being the mystery and flavor becomes the focus. Many sources describe the U.S. honey market as having well over 300 labeled varieties for sale, mostly because the name on the jar often reflects the dominant flowers in a region, not a single universal honey flavor. The label is a clue about what the bees were visiting most during that harvest, in that place. That number is less about counting a fixed menu and more about admitting how many blooming landscapes exist across a year. The practical result is that honey is not one ingredient so much as a category. A jar can change with season, weather, bloom timing, and local plant life, even when it is simply called honey. When you start treating honey like a family of foods, it becomes easier to choose it the way you choose apples, by style, not just by sweetness. A clear starting point in that family is clover honey. Clover blooms widely across pastures and open fields, and it can provide bees with an abundant nectar source in many parts of the United States. Clover honey is usually light in color and mild in flavor, which is why it often becomes a default table honey for tea, toast, and everyday baking. Mildness matters because it sweetens without stepping on other flavors, the way a neutral oil can support a recipe without announcing itself. In baking, that milder profile can also keep the honey from pulling the whole batter in a dark molasses direction unless you want it to. If you are trying to learn what a recipe means by honey without specifying a flower, clover is often the closest reference point. Once you know that mild baseline, darker honeys can feel like a different tool. Buckwheat honey is typically much darker and stronger than clover, and it is often described as robust, earthy, and almost molasses-like. Darker honeys are frequently reported to contain higher levels of certain antioxidants and minerals, but the exact amounts vary by crop, region, and handling, so it is best to treat that as a general trend rather than a promise. The more reliable kitchen point is flavor. Buckwheat honey behaves more like a seasoning ingredient than a simple sweetener, the way dark brown sugar tastes different from white sugar, even at the same level of sweetness. If you need honey to show up clearly in a sauce, a marinade, or a rye-style baked good, a darker honey like buckwheat can deliver that presence. Orange blossom honey sits on another part of the spectrum. It is commonly associated with citrus-growing regions because it is produced when bees work orange and other citrus flowers during bloom. It is often described as light and fragrant, with a gentle citrus-like note that feels more like aroma than acidity. The scent can read as floral first, then slightly bright, like a soft echo of blossoms rather than a squeeze of juice. That makes it useful when you want sweetness with a clean edge, especially in yogurt, dressings, or simple glazes where the honey is not hidden by strong spices. It is one of the clearest examples of how honey can carry flower memory in aroma without any added flavoring. And when the label stops naming one flower, it starts naming a moment. Wildflower honey is not one fixed flavor profile. It is a seasonal snapshot that reflects whatever is blooming in that area when the bees are gathering. A wildflower jar from spring can taste noticeably different from a wildflower jar from late summer, even if both come from the same state, and sometimes even from the same beekeeper. That makes wildflower honey less predictable but often more expressive, because it carries a sense of place without insisting on one plant name. If you like to notice small differences the way you might notice different batches of coffee, wildflower honey is an easy place to start. It can be bright, grassy, fruity, or deeper and more herbal, depending on what the fields offered that year. It rewards simple tasting, one spoonful, one pause, and then the next jar. Some honeys stand out not only for flavor, but for how they behave in the jar over time. Acacia honey is often noted for staying liquid longer than many other honeys, and the usual explanation is its sugar balance. These light honeys tend to be higher in fructose relative to glucose. Because glucose is the sugar that crystallizes more readily, a honey with more fructose can remain clear and pourable for a long time. In U.S. shops, acacia is sometimes used for a light, delicate style that is also sold as black locust honey in many places. And labeling is not always consistent from brand to brand. The everyday takeaway is simple. If you hate dealing with a grainy jar, an acacia-labeled or black locust-style honey often buys you more time before crystallization becomes obvious. It also reinforces a bigger idea. The flower source can change not only flavor, but also texture and shelf behavior. Eucalyptus honey is another example of honey as a strongly flavored ingredient. It is produced when bees work eucalyptus blossoms, and it is often described as bold with a slightly herbal, menthol-like edge. That strength means it can stand up in recipes where honey has to compete with strong ingredients, such as ginger, soy, mustard, or dark spices. A useful comparison is black pepper versus white pepper. Both season, but one announces itself more clearly. If you want a honey that tastes like it belongs in the savory pantry, eucalyptus is one of the types that often fits that description. It can make honey feel less like a dessert note and more like a confident supporting flavor in marinades, sauces, and glazes. Across the honey shelf, color is one of the quickest sorting tools you can use. Honey can range from nearly clear to pale gold, then into deep amber and brown. Color is shaped mostly by nectar source, with seasonal and processing factors also playing a role. In general, lighter honeys tend to taste milder, while darker honeys tend to taste stronger. But there are exceptions, so color is a clue, not a rule. Still, it helps you choose by function. A pale honey often suits delicate foods, where you want sweetness without a heavy footprint. A deeper honey often suits hearty foods, where you want honey to sound like itself, not just act like sugar. Looking through the jar in good light can be a quick way to sort the shelf without memorizing every flower name. Honey labels can be confusing because single-flower honeys are rarely from only one plant. The name usually means that nectar from that plant was dominant during that harvest, not exclusive. Bees do not obey property lines or product labels, so even a strong orange blossom season will include small contributions from nearby blooms. In everyday terms, honey naming is more like calling a bread rye when it has a strong rye character, not necessarily 100% rye flour. Understanding that labeling is about dominance rather than purity helps you trust the category without expecting perfect uniformity. Under every variety, the simplest truth is that honey's flavor, color, and texture are determined by which flowers bees visit, because nectar chemistry changes from plant to plant. That one fact explains why two honeys with the same sweetness can taste completely different, and why a honey can seem fruity, herbal, or caramel-like without any added flavoring. It also explains why regional honeys matter, because plants are not evenly distributed and bloom timing shifts with weather. A rainy spring, a dry summer, or an early bloom can change what is available when the bees are collecting. If you keep that cause and effect link in mind, choosing honey becomes less about brand and more about botany. With those patterns in mind, the next step is to bring honey into everyday cooking decisions. Honey does more than sweeten. It browns readily, it holds moisture, and it carries aroma in a way plain sugar does not. When honey is baked into bread, whisked into a sauce, or brushed onto a roast, the differences between jars become even easier to taste. And that leads naturally into what honey does best when it meets heat, flour, and the practical rhythms of recipes. Honey is sweeter than white sugar by volume, so most recipes need less of it to reach the same level of sweetness. A calm starting swap is 1 cup of sugar replaced by about 3/4 of a cup of honey. Honey is denser, and it carries more dissolved sugars in the same measuring cup. Much of that sweetness comes from fructose and glucose, and fructose tends to taste sweeter than sucrose. That is why a 1-to-1 swap can feel too sweet even when the rest of a recipe is unchanged. Honey is also a liquid sweetener with its own aroma, so it often pays to start small in sauces and dressings. Begin with a tablespoon or 2. Stir, taste, and build slowly. Remember that every spoonful also brings some water, which can loosen a mixture over time if you keep adding. In baking, honey acts like a softness tool. It attracts and holds moisture, and that water binding slows the dry, stale feel that builds as days pass. In cakes, muffins, chewy bars, cookies, and some sandwich breads, honey can keep the crumb tender longer than versions sweetened only with dry sugar. Dry sugar tends to set and dry as it cools. Honey keeps pulling moisture toward itself, which helps starches firm up more slowly and helps surfaces stay less brittle. That is one reason honey-sweetened cookies often stay chewier instead of turning crisp overnight. Even a small amount, just a few tablespoons in a batch, can shift texture. Very large amounts can make a bake heavy and sticky, which is why honey shows up so often in bars and soft loaves meant to stay pliable. It can also soften the sharp, crisp edge in oatmeal-style cookies, turning the bite more bendy than snappy. When honey replaces sugar, a few small tweaks can prevent the 2 most common surprises. The first surprise is a batter that turns too wet. The second is a top that browns too fast. Because honey brings its own water, many bakers reduce other liquids slightly so the batter stays thick enough to trap air and set properly. It might be just a small cut, a few spoonfuls, less milk or water, depending on the recipe. Honey is also mildly acidic, so some recipes benefit from a small pinch of baking soda to balance the acidity and support lift. That extra lift can help a cake or quick bread rise evenly, but too much soda can leave a soapy note and a yellow tint. Honey also browns quickly, so lowering oven heat by about 25 degrees Fahrenheit, lining pans well, and checking a little early are simple guardrails. If the top colors too soon, a lower rack or a loose foil cover can protect it while the middle finishes. Honey also behaves like a fast browning glaze when it sits on a hot, dry surface. A honey-coated chicken wing, salmon fillet, or roasted carrot can move from glossy amber to bitter brown quickly, especially under a broiler or in a very hot pan where moisture evaporates fast. Timing is the simplest control. Add honey near the end, or dilute it into a sauce with water, citrus, vinegar, or soy, so it heats more gently and spreads into a thinner film. Another steady method is brushing honey on in thin layers during the last stage of cooking. You can also stir honey into a hot pan sauce off the heat, letting residual warmth melt it in without scorching it. Barbecue sauces and quick glazes Adding honey after simmering keeps the sweetness cleaner and reduces burnt notes. And while honey is friendly in the kitchen, there is one age-related rule worth keeping close. Food safety guidance generally advises that honey should not be given to infants under 1 year old. Honey can contain botulism spores that a young digestive system may not handle safely. The risk is not that honey is dangerous for older children and adults. The risk is that infants do not yet have the same gut defenses that keep spores from growing and producing toxin. Because this is about spores and a developing gut, honey in foods, drinks, and even small tastes, including honey on a pacifier or stirred into herbal tea, is usually treated as an avoid until one guideline. This caution applies whether the jar is labeled raw or filtered. For everyone older than 1, honey is widely used as a normal food. When the goal is flavor, honey does best away from aggressive heat. Its delicate aromas are sensitive, and some raw honeys also contain enzymes that lose activity when heated hard or repeatedly. Many aroma compounds fade with high temperatures. That is why honey often tastes brighter when it is stirred into warm drinks after the steam calms down, especially when the honey is floral and light. Microwaving can create hot spots that overheat part of the honey, even when the jar feels only warm. So slow, warming in a warm water bath is usually kinder when you need honey to flow. If the goal is simply pourability, warming honey to around body temperature is often enough. Keeping the jar away from steady heat helps the floral notes stay clearer over weeks. Measuring honey can feel messy because it clings to spoons, cups, and jar rims. A few small habits make it easier. A light film of neutral oil on a measuring spoon or cup helps honey slide off more completely, so the amount in the bowl is closer to what you intended. A quick dip of the spoon in warm water can do the same job. Some cooks use a light mist of cooking spray for larger measures. When you are done, rinsing tools with hot water right away dissolves residue fast, since honey is mostly sugars that melt into water without scrubbing. A silicone spatula can scrape the last ribbon from a measuring cup in one pass. If honey has thickened from cool storage, warming the closed jar briefly in warm water helps it pour cleanly and keeps measurements consistent. Honey can also stand in for corn syrup in some candies and glazes because it is mostly simple sugars, and it dissolves smoothly when heated with water. Corn syrup is often used to discourage large sugar crystals. Honey can sometimes help with that too, partly because its natural mix of sugars does not all crystallize in the same way, and fructose is more willing to remain in a smooth syrup. The trade-off is that honey brings flavor and mild acidity. A candy may taste deeper, darken sooner, and end up slightly softer unless the cooking temperature and final moisture are adjusted. A practical place to experiment is caramel sauce, marshmallows, chewy bars, or stovetop glazes. Swapping honey for only part of the syrup at first makes the change easier to control, especially if the honey is dark and strong. Watch color, watch aroma, and let the batch teach you how that jar behaves under heat. Storage can stay simple. A sealed jar, kept at room temperature, can remain usable for a very long time, and the most common change is crystallization rather than spoilage. Refrigeration often encourages crystallization, so room temperature storage usually keeps honey easier to pour. A tight lid and a dry spoon keep humidity from raising moisture at the surface. Crystallized honey is still good honey, and the grains are usually glucose crystals, not mold. The jar can be warmed gently in warm water until it loosens and turns smooth again. Boiling is unnecessary and can drive off aroma. Some people stir crystallized honey until it turns evenly creamy, and if honey ever smells fizzy or lightly alcoholic, it usually means extra moisture got in, which is why beekeepers check ripeness and moisture before honey is taken from frames. And why at home, the simplest habit is keeping the jar clean, dry, and firmly closed. Modern beekeeping changed dramatically when hives were redesigned so comb could be removed and returned without destroying the colony. One of the most influential steps was the movable frame hive developed by Lorenzo Langstroth in 1851. His design was built around the idea of bee space, a narrow gap that bees tend not to fill with comb or glue shut. That one detail turns a hive into something a keeper can read. Food, brood, and honey stores can be checked by lifting frames, instead of breaking the nest apart. The practical result is that a colony can be managed and harvested repeatedly with far less disruption. That is why the Langstroth style box became a standard reference in many places. Once a hive became inspectable, beekeeping became more predictable, and predictability is what turns a seasonal gamble into a routine. Because inspections happen close to the bees, protective gear is less about fighting and more about giving the keeper time to move slowly. A typical setup includes a veil to protect the face, gloves for the hands, and a jacket or suit that limits stings through fabric. Even gentle colonies can sting if they feel crushed, crowded, or threatened. Fast, anxious movements make those accidents more likely. With protection in place, a keeper can take frames out carefully, avoid sudden bumps, and put everything back without panic. The bees respond to that steadiness. In practice, good gear supports gentler handling, and gentler handling supports calmer bees, which keeps inspections useful rather than rushed. Smoke is another tool that creates a short window of calm. Beekeepers use a smoker to send cool smoke near the hive entrance and above the frames. Many explanations emphasize two effects. Smoke can mask alarm pheromones, and it can trigger a feeding response. When bees sense smoke, they may fill up on honey, as if preparing to abandon the nest. A bee with a full honey stomach is often less eager to escalate, and physical positioning can also make stinging less likely. Masking alarm scent matters too, because alarm signals recruit more guard behavior and can turn a small disturbance into a larger defensive wave. Smoke does not hypnotize bees. It simply buys time, long enough for a quick inspection or harvest while the colony stays organized instead of switching fully into defense. Backyard beekeeping is possible because a productive hive does not need a huge footprint, only the right placement and steady care. A single hive can fit in a small garden, a side yard, or even on a rooftop, as long as the colony has access to forage and a reliable water source nearby. Local rules and neighbor comfort matter. So many people face the entrance away from walkways and sitting areas. Some also provide water on site, so bees are less likely to visit swimming pools, pet bowls, or dripping air conditioners. The core point is that a hive is not a roaming animal. It is a fixed home that bees travel out from and return to. So, location decisions shape how smoothly it coexists with daily life. Once a hive is placed well, the next question becomes how often to open it. During active months, many keepers inspect hives about every 1 to 2 weeks, adjusting by season, weather, and nectar flow. The aim is usually simple. Confirm the queen is laying. Check that brood patterns look steady. Make sure there are enough food stores for the current conditions. Inspections also look for common issues such as overcrowding, unusual aggression, and pests. The earlier a problem is seen, the simpler the fix tends to be. At the same time, opening a hive too often can stress the colony and interrupt temperature control. Experienced keepers balance curiosity with restraint because the hive must keep brood warm and organized even while a human is looking. That balance is part of what makes beekeeping feel like steady stewardship rather than constant interference. Honey harvesting is planned around the colony's needs because the honey in the hive is the bee's winter food, not a spare product by default. In many climates, a colony must carry substantial stores through cold or rainy periods when flowers are scarce. Taking too much can leave the bees unable to maintain warmth and feed themselves. That is why keepers usually harvest only when there is a true surplus, and they leave enough sealed honey behind for the colony to survive until the next reliable bloom. In some cases, people feed sugar syrup when stores are low. That can keep a colony from starving, but it is a support measure, not a perfect replacement for a hive's own honey reserves. The simple takeaway is that responsible beekeeping treats harvest as a careful margin, not as a full pantry raid. Modern extraction works because frames make it possible to remove honey without melting the comb or squeezing it by hand. The process often starts with uncapping, removing the thin wax lids from sealed honey cells. Uncapping exposes the honey so it can leave the comb. Frames are then placed into an extractor, a drum that spins like a centrifuge. As it turns, force slings honey out of the cells while leaving the wax structure mostly intact. Honey drains to the bottom. Then it is strained to remove wax flecks and allowed to settle so bubbles rise. The result is a clearer pour and a much more efficient harvest than older methods. Preserving comb also saves the colony energy because building wax from scratch is costly. Those wax caps removed during uncapping are not waste. They are a valuable byproduct, and they show how beekeeping tends to recycle materials. Cappings are often drained and rendered into beeswax, which can be formed into blocks or used to make foundation sheets that guide comb building in future seasons. Wax matters because bees spend a lot of energy converting honey into wax. Reusing wax products can reduce how much comb building the colony must do before it can focus on storing nectar. This is another quiet benefit of frames. Extracted frames can be returned to the hive, so bees can clean them, repair small damage, and refill them quickly instead of starting from bare wood. For many hobbyist keepers, a realistic harvest is not a barrel. It is a modest amount that reflects local flowers, weather, and the length of the nectar season. People often report yields around 20 to 40 pounds of honey per hive in a decent year, though it can be far lower in poor nectar seasons and much higher in exceptional ones. This range sets expectations. A backyard hive can provide meaningful honey without behaving like an industrial operation. It also explains why most small-scale keepers focus on colony health first, because a strong colony is what makes any surplus possible in the first place. If you see harvest as a variable bonus, it becomes easier to notice the other steady output a hive provides. Beekeeping supports pollination because a healthy colony sends thousands of foragers through nearby blooms day after day, and each trip moves pollen between flowers. In home gardens, that often means better fruit set in plants such as squash, cucumbers, berries, and tree fruits, even though wild pollinators also contribute. The practical result is that a hive can act like a concentrated pollination workforce, which is one reason farms sometimes place colonies near crops during bloom. At the same time, honeybees are only one part of a larger pollinator web. Their success depends on forage, habitat, and health pressures that extend beyond a single yard. Following that link from honey jars to flowering crops leads naturally into what pollination really means for the foods people eat every day. Pollination is the quiet step that turns a flower into a fruit or a seed, and honeybees help by moving pollen between blossoms while they forage. Pollen is a plant's genetic material, and it has to reach the right part of a flower for fertilization to happen. When a bee slips into a bloom for nectar, pollen grains cling to her body and legs, then rub off on the next flower she visits. Bees also pack some pollen onto their hind legs in pollen baskets, which lets them carry a load home without losing every grain. In everyday terms, the bee is doing careful transfer work in tiny doses, repeated so often that an orchard can set fruit without anyone touching each blossom by hand. A common idea is that roughly 1/3 of what people eat is connected to animal pollination, though the exact share depends on whether you measure calories, nutrients, or variety. Many of the biggest calorie staples, like wheat, rice, and corn, are mostly wind-pollinated or self-pollinated, so they do not rely heavily on bees for basic yield. Yet many fruits, nuts, and vegetables depend on animal pollinators to set good harvests and good shape, and those foods carry much of the color, crunch, and freshness people notice day to day. Another way to say it is that pollinators matter more for food diversity than for total calories, which is why the impact feels larger in the produce aisle than in a sack of grain. Honeybees matter in modern pollination because they are managed in large colonies that can be moved and concentrated where bloom is happening. Wild pollinators are vital, but their numbers and timing can be uneven across landscapes that are heavily farmed or frequently mowed. A honeybee colony is a portable workforce that can be placed next to a crop when flowers open, then moved away when bloom ends. This is why honeybees became a cornerstone of pollination services, even though they are only one part of a larger pollinator world. The goal is simple: get a lot of visits into a short flowering window, then let the plants do the rest. Some crops lean on honeybees so heavily that pollination becomes a planned input, like irrigation or fertilizer, rather than a lucky extra. Almonds are a clear United States example because orchards bloom in a tight window and need dense pollination quickly, so colonies are brought in during bloom to move pollen across rows on schedule. Growers often describe this as renting bees because the bloom period is short and the pollination work has to happen in the right week, not whenever wild insects happen to show up. Apples and many stone fruits benefit from cross-pollination, and more complete pollination usually means better fruit, set, and more even shape. Blueberries, cucumbers, melons, and squash also tend to produce more consistently when bees visit regularly. When a food depends on that brief bloom window, the timing of pollination becomes just as important as later steps of growing and harvesting. It is easy to underestimate scale because each visit is so small. You will hear huge numbers attached to pollination, like a single colony visiting millions of flowers in a day, and the spirit of that claim holds even when the exact figure shifts with weather and bloom density. A strong colony can send out thousands of foragers, and each forager may visit dozens of flowers per trip, and make multiple trips when nectar is flowing. Multiply small visits by a large workforce, and the scale becomes enormous because pollination is built from repetition rather than single dramatic events. This is also why a few good flying hours in the morning can matter, because some blossoms are most receptive during a short window before heat or wind dries them out. Once that window passes, missed visits can be hard to replace later. Commercial beekeeping often moves hives to crops during bloom because flowering happens in waves across regions and farms need pollinators in a specific window. Colonies are typically moved during cool hours when most bees are inside, then secured so boxes do not shift. Heat management matters, so ventilation is maintained and travel timing is planned to reduce stress. At the destination, hives are opened so foragers can begin learning the new map, working nearby blooms first and widening their loops as they orient. This practice is often called migratory beekeeping, and it turns pollination into a service that follows the calendar, from early spring orchards to later season berries and vegetables. The practical consequence is that bee health becomes tied to logistics. Moving hives means managing heat, ventilation, food reserves, and stress during travel. It also concentrates many colonies in one place at one time, which can increase competition for forage once the crop bloom ends, especially if the surrounding area lacks diverse flowering plants. When movement goes well, the payoff is simple. Flowers get visited when they are ready, and growers can plan around that reliability. When movement goes poorly, the costs can show up later as weakened colonies, reduced foraging strength, or problems that take weeks to repair. Wild bees and other pollinators contribute alongside honeybees, and many crops do best when multiple species are present. Some native bees are especially efficient on certain flowers because of body size, hair patterns, or the way they move through petals, and they can deliver more pollen per visit than a honeybee does. Bumblebees, for example, can perform buzz pollination by vibrating certain flowers, which helps release pollen from plants like tomatoes in a way honeybees usually cannot match. Solitary bees can also be excellent pollinators, and some fly in cooler weather or work flowers that honeybees ignore. Mason bees can be strong early season pollinators because they fly in cooler weather. Flies and beetles also pollinate and can matter on cloudy days. A diverse pollinator community means different insects cover different flowers and conditions. Since around 2006, beekeepers have reported episodes of unusually high colony losses associated with what became known as colony collapse disorder, though researchers emphasize that colony losses have multiple causes and have shifted over time. Early descriptions focused on colonies that seemed to lose large numbers of adult workers while leaving brood and food behind, which made the pattern feel sudden and puzzling. Over the years, attention has moved toward a combined stress picture involving parasites, diseases, nutrition, chemicals, and management pressures, rather than one single trigger. Many beekeepers now talk about annual losses more broadly, because the CCD pattern is not the only way colonies fail. The practical takeaway is that healthy bees are not one checkbox, but several basic needs met at the same time. One of the most consistent stressors for honeybees is a parasitic mite called Varroa destructor, because it feeds on bees and helps spread viruses within colonies. Varroa reproduces inside brood cells, so its population can rise during the same season the colony is trying to grow, which is why monitoring matters. As mites feed, they weaken bees directly, and by moving between bees, they can amplify infections such as deformed wing virus, which reduces a worker's ability to forage and shortens useful lifespan. Because mites and viruses often travel together, modern management tends to focus on keeping mite levels low before symptoms are obvious, rather than waiting for a visible crash. Treatments vary by region and by philosophy, but the shared goal is consistent: reduce mite pressure so the colony's normal workforce can keep replacing itself. Supporting pollinators often comes down to providing steady food and reducing unnecessary harm, and small choices matter when many people make them. Planting a mix of flowers that bloom in different months helps because bees need nectar and pollen across a season, not only during one impressive week. Letting some early bloomers stay available, like clover or dandelions in a corner that is not being manicured for looks, can matter when spring flowers are still scarce. Avoiding broad-spectrum insecticides during bloom and using targeted methods when pests must be controlled lowers the chance of harming visiting pollinators. Habitat helps too. Leaving patches of bare soil supports ground nesting bees, and leaving some old stems or undisturbed corners supports cavity nesters. A shallow water dish with stones for landing lets insects drink without drowning. When many small choices add up, pollination looks like a steady partnership. Honey shows up in proverbs, poetry, and sacred writing because it is a real food with a metaphor built into it, sweetness that can be held, measured, and saved. For most of human history, sweet flavors were seasonal and fragile. Fruit ripened and vanished. Sap ran only when weather allowed it. Even sweet grains needed grinding, boiling, and time. Honey was different because it could be carried home and kept in a jar without turning quickly, so sweetness could appear on an ordinary weekday, not only at a celebration or in a harvest season. Before refined sugar was cheap and everywhere, that kind of dependable sweetness was unusual, and it made honey feel like a small stored promise. That helps explain why honey became a reference point for pleasure, kindness, and persuasion in everyday speech, long before corn syrup and packaged candy were ordinary purchases. It is also why honey can feel both practical and symbolic at once, because it is literal sweetness, and also proof that sweetness can last. In English, honeyed words means flattering talk meant to smooth an interaction. The phrase leans on a kitchen truth: sweetness can soften bitterness. Honey itself can also be a gentle term of address because it sounds warm and familiar, like offering something sweet instead of something sharp. Similar ideas show up in many languages, where sweetness stands in for friendliness and ease. At the same time, honey can carry a warning, because sweetness can persuade as well as comfort. Speech that feels pleasant can still be designed to influence, which is why the image works in more than one direction. Across cultures, honey is offered as a gift, named as a reward, and used as a symbol for what is good and lasting. It is a sweet food that can wait patiently on a shelf, and that patience helps it carry meaning. One phrase that returns again and again is "a land of milk and honey," used in biblical texts as a picture of abundance and security. Milk points to domesticated animals and daily nourishment. It suggests herds, grazing, and food that can be renewed each day. Honey points to a landscape rich in flowering plants, where sweetness can be found and stored without a mill, a press, or a refinery. Put together, the pair suggests not luxury imports, but a stable food system, where people can rely on steady staples and also enjoy a surplus that can be carried forward. Milk spoils quickly and honey keeps, so the image quietly ties daily food to long-keeping sweetness. It also implies enough blooms, enough clean forage, and enough healthy bees for the land to offer sweetness year after year, not as a rare treat, but as a dependable part of life. From words, it is easy to drift back to the hive, because the hive is where honey becomes something you can store. Honeycomb is often praised for its hexagonal structure, and the praise is not only aesthetic. Hexagons fit together with no gaps, so comb packs storage efficiently into a limited volume. That matters because bees spend energy to create wax and then defend what they store. The shared walls of hexagons also mean each cell helps support its neighbors, spreading weight across the sheet so thin wax behaves more like a sturdy panel than a fragile lace. When comb is heavy with honey, the strength of the pattern matters. Circles would leave empty space between them, and many other tiling shapes would require more wall length to enclose the same area. More wall length means more wax, and wax is costly for a colony to produce. The hexagon is a practical compromise, strong, tight, and efficient. And noticing that efficiency helps connect wax and honey as a single story, one building the space and the other filling it. Beeswax matters because it is water resistant, workable when warmed, and stable at room temperature. Unlike many fats, it does not spoil quickly, and it holds shape once it cools. One long-standing use is candles, since beeswax can burn steadily and store well in dry conditions, which mattered before electric light and still matters for craft today. Wax is also a practical sealant. It can close small gaps, coat thread, and help protect wood or leather from moisture. In the home, it shows up in furniture polish, leather conditioner, lip balm, and skin creams where it gives structure and slows moisture loss. People also use it to coat cheese rinds, to protect wooden utensils and cutting boards, and to make reusable beeswax wraps that hold food without a disposable bag. In a kitchen, wax can reduce sticking on some baking pans, and it can be used to condition tools that dry out with washing. The same qualities that make wax useful in a hive, stability and resistance to water, are what make it useful in everyday life. Once you are looking at wax, other hive substances follow naturally because bees use more than one material to keep a colony stable. Royal jelly is a nutrient-rich secretion made by worker bees, and it plays a central role in turning one larva into a queen. All young larvae receive royal jelly at first, but a future queen continues on royal jelly as her main diet, while worker larvae shift to a different food mixture. That feeding difference helps steer development, producing a queen built for reproduction and colony continuity rather than foraging labor. The practical point is clear. Nutrition influences body form and lifespan, shaping roles inside the colony. Outside the hive, royal jelly is harvested in small amounts and sold fresh, frozen, or dried in supplements and skincare, because the fresh material is perishable and handled carefully. Evidence for broad health benefits is limited, so it is safer to treat royal jelly as fascinating biology first and a product second. Propolis is another hive substance that shows how bees borrow from plants and turn it into construction. Propolis begins as sticky resin gathered from buds and sap. Bees mix it with wax and spread it where the hive needs sealing, which is why beekeepers often call it bee glue. Bees use it to close cracks, smooth rough surfaces, and reduce drafts, stabilizing internal conditions with less wasted heat and less moisture swing, especially in colder or windier seasons. Propolis also has antimicrobial properties, so it can discourage microbial growth on surfaces the bees touch often. Beekeepers sometimes note that bees may coat materials they cannot remove, sealing problems away from the brood area instead of letting them decay openly. People use propolis in tinctures, lozenges, and sprays, but it can trigger allergic reactions in some individuals. So it is a good example of how natural does not always mean universally gentle. In modern life, honey has also become something people travel for. Honey tourism has grown because tasting honey is a quick way to taste a region's plants without needing a full meal or a long explanation. Many apiaries offer tours where visitors see observation hives behind glass, learn how frames are uncapped and extracted, and sample several honeys side by side. A tasting flight can teach the same lesson as coffee or olive oil tastings. Subtle differences are real and tied to place, weather, and bloom timing. One honey may taste light and floral. Another may lean darker and more mineral. And the contrast becomes obvious when jars are compared in a calm line. This kind of travel also supports local beekeepers, and it often nudges visitors toward practical choices like planting flowering natives and avoiding pesticide use during bloom, because the flavor in the jar depends on what is blooming outside the hive. Local honey is sometimes promoted as a way to reduce seasonal allergy symptoms, based on the idea that small exposures to local pollen might act like gentle desensitization. Evidence is mixed, and the mechanism is not straightforward. Many major airborne allergens come from wind-pollinated plants, and those pollen sources do not always match what bees collect from flowers. Honey is also often filtered, and even unfiltered honey can vary widely in pollen content, depending on season and handling. So exposure is not consistent in the way a medical allergy treatment would need to be. Studies have not produced a clear, reliable effect. It can still be worth buying local honey for flavor and to support beekeepers, while keeping expectations practical. If allergies are severe, it is safest to treat honey as food, not as a replacement for medical guidance. When I step back, honey's enduring place is easier to understand because it is simple at the point of use, even though it is complex at the point of origin. One jar can sweeten tea, tenderize baked goods, balance a vinaigrette, glaze a roast, or round out a sauce. The same ingredient moves between sweet and savory without needing extra processing. Honey also stores unusually well when kept sealed and dry, so it behaves more like a pantry staple than a fragile treat. If it is diluted with water, it can ferment, so the keeping power depends on staying concentrated and sealed. In certain mixtures, its concentrated sugars can help slow microbial growth, which is why honey has been used as a helper in some preserved foods and syrups. But it is not a substitute for safe modern preservation methods when safety is the goal. The practical point stays simple. Honey is easy to use, easy to store, and unusually flexible at the table. From flowers to bees to comb to jar, the chain is short and understandable. Nectar would spoil quickly on its own, but the hive concentrates it and seals it behind wax. A person opens the jar and finds sweetness that can wait on a shelf, ready for a spoon, a cup of tea, or a quiet glaze added near the end of cooking. Honey is not only taste, it is stored work, stored bloom, and stored summer light, held in a form that lasts. That is why honey keeps returning in language, in ritual, and in everyday kitchens, because it is both a practical ingredient and a steady reminder that something delicate can be made durable. Good night, and may your sleep come gently and stay with you.